Good evening. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for your introduction to the MIT EMBA application. Today we will review the application, the process, and share guidance for candidates who are looking to apply this year. So let's get started. Let me first introduce myself. I'm Anupa Isaac, one of the admissions advisors for the MIT Executive MBA. I work closely with Sarah, and I'm here to help candidates like yourself navigate the application process, program fit, requirements, and how to present your strongest application. I'm also joined today by Sarah Massey. Sarah, you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody. I'm really looking forward to answering your questions and talking about the application process. Like Anupa said, we work really closely together on both the admission side of things, and then I also advise students who are in the program. And I've been working with students in the Executive MBA program for the last 9 years. So happy to answer any questions about that. But today we're really going to focus on the application process and how you can frame your candidacy. Look forward to it.
So today's agenda is to provide an overview of the MIT Executive MBA program and community, walk you through the application process, and answer your questions with a focus on the areas you're most interested in. So please use the Q&A part of the Zoom to put in your questions, and we will get to them after our presentation. Before we talk about the program, I'm going to take a quick second to explain our mission. MIT, MIT Sloan, and the Executive MBA program are all deeply mission-driven. As part of a world-class research institution, MIT Sloan plays a vital role in turning innovation into real-world organizational capabilities. The mission of MIT Sloan is to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and to generate ideas that advance management practice. The Executive MBA offers a distinct opportunity by allowing students to immediately apply their learning in real-world contexts. And the mission of the MIT EMBA is empowering and connecting leaders to redefine our shared future. So let's talk a little bit about the EMBA structure. You will earn the same MBA degree as our 2-year traditional MBA program. The distinction is in the format and the cohort. The MIT EMBA is a 20-month experience where you are on campus 26 weekends, which is every 2 to 3 weeks. Our weekends are Fridays and Saturdays. There will also be 4 week-long modules spaced every 6 months and an international week-long project that is part of an executive lab course that takes place around mid-March of your final year. Now that you have a sense of the program itself, let's take a closer look at the people who make it special. Your cohort. This data is pulled from the MIT EMBA class of 2026, but these numbers remain fairly similar year over year. Imagine yourself in a classroom of 126 global executives. The average years of work experience in the room is 17, and the average age in the room is 41. Age range in recent years has been from 29 to 68. 65% of the class is traveling from outside of Massachusetts each class weekend to attend in person. 61% of our students hold an advanced degree of some kind, which could be an MD, law degree, PhD, or master's. 76% are at the director level of their organization and above. The one thing that 100% of our admits have in common, though, is that they're employed full-time. Now let's talk about industry representation. Our students come from a wide range of industries, and every class reflects that diversity. We consistently have seen software technology, banking, financial services, healthcare, hospitals, and pharma, biotech, medical devices as our top industries, but not always in those order. You'll also notice that the other category represents a large portion of our class, and that has been very typical and consistent. We have students from all different industries like consumer goods, entertainment, energy, food and beverage consulting, management, manufacturing, nonprofit, transportation, etc. These diverse experiences bring valuable perspectives to every class discussion. As we mentioned before, 76% of our class are the director level or above. This also means that 24% of our class are managers and individual contributors holding strategic roles within their organizations. Entrepreneurs might be interested to see that 10% of our students are full-time entrepreneurs. Our students work in organizations that range from large enterprises with more than 10,000 employees to small businesses with fewer than 25. As you can see, 30% of the class are from companies that have fewer than 500 employees. No matter the size, each experience brings valuable and distinct perspectives to the cohort. Our community is incredibly diverse geographically. More than half of our students travel from outside the Northeast, with around 16% traveling internationally to attend classes here on campus. Our international students join us from places as close as Canada to as far as Romania, China, Singapore, Senegal, Brazil, Finland, etc. Now that we've talked about who makes up our class, let's look at what we look for in an MIT executive MBA candidate. Every MIT MBA student brings a strong foundation of professional experience, at least 10 years of work experience. Leadership experience is another key element. This might mean managing a business, division, or department, often with responsibility for budget, strategy, or people development. We also describe our students as quant comfortable. We look for at least one course in statistics and one in calculus, each with a grade of B or better. If you haven't taken these courses for credit yet, we highly recommend enrolling in one now to strengthen your application and to prepare for the academic rigor of our coursework. In addition, we look for organizational support. By that, what we mean is that it's important that your employer understands and supports the time commitment required for the program. Because of the emphasis on action learning, you'll be applying classroom concepts directly to your organization. So that partnership is essential. Finally, beyond these requirements, the ideal MIT EMBA candidate would also be an innovator, someone who challenges the status quo. This means combining a strong leadership performance, global perspective, functional expertise, and of course, innovation. Now that I've given you some background about the class, Sarah, do you want to talk about the application? I think, Sarah,
Hopefully,
you're muted.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anupa. Hopefully, all of you who are listening and watching today were able to see yourself in our class through some of the information that Anupa was sharing, how you would fit into this group. So now that you can picture yourself here, let's get started on the process to get here. In the application, the first component is your written application. Once you submit your written application, interviews are by invitation and they are the next step. And the final decision is made by our admissions committee after interviews. So let's get started with the application. I'm going to talk about each component of the application, but really with an emphasis on, yes, you can look it up and see the instructions, but we'll give a little bit of perspective on how the admissions committee is viewing these components and ways that you can think about strengthening your contribution. So let's begin with the essays. In the essays, you'll see that we have shorter essays. So we don't have one, oh, and I see people are using the Q&A. This is super helpful. I might get to some while we're going in person, but I'll make sure we get to as many as possible. So keep throwing them in there. So the applications are, you will notice, instead of one-pagers or cover letters, we have shorter essay questions. They're 100 words up to, at maximum, 300 words. So we know they're short. What might help you in thinking about, okay, it's hard to get everything you want to say into 100 words. Well, that's okay. You don't have to. We will read all of the essays. So actually think about it instead of one 100-word essay, know that we're going to read each one in order. So they don't all need to tell us everything about you. They need to answer that question directly that they're being asked, but then also think about how they fit together. Make sure that you have examples where relevant that are detailed. Give a brief description of the situation. Be really cognizant of when you're using the word we. It's such an easy trap to fall into because you all work in groups, but make sure to isolate your role from the roles of others, right? What did you say or do versus others say and do? It doesn't mean take all the credit for yourself, but it just means to make sure that you're differentiating. And particularly for those of you who are in technical fields, but really across any industry, Anupa and I and everyone on the committee has a pretty good understanding of a lot of different industries, but we are not in your industry, and the jargon can really bog us down. So a tip that I'll give to people is, have someone outside of your industry take a look at your essays, and do they understand everything you're saying, or are there abbreviations or words that are that can be reworked into more plain English? All right, so we've talked a little bit about the essays. In the application, we're also going to ask about your work history. And so to get a sense of your work history, we'll ask for some really standard things. Your resume, 2-pager. So doctors and scientists, you're going to have to shorten it to the 2-page a business resume. We will ask for an organization chart. You might have one out of the box, or you might need to build one for us, something that we can see in a page or two that gives a good representation of your organization. And we have instructions in the application and examples to give you an idea of what we're looking for. But the briefest guide I can give you for the org chart is to make sure that it provides a context on the wider organization. So detail where it gets close to you, but make sure it zooms out enough on the organization to give us some context. For jobs within the past 10 years, we'll have a section that asks for very specific questions, and that's to help us compare apples to apples, right? Everybody's resume is different, but just for the jobs within the past 10 years, we'll ask some standard questions. So we'll get some apples to apples there. And then you'll write a professional summary. So all pretty basic. We're getting a good summary there, and we're hopefully providing really clear instructions on that. This is, it zooms out, it zooms in, it gives us a little bit of context on where you are. All right, what do we have next? Okay, transcripts. So we're trying to get a sense of your work history. You'll all have at least 10 years to work with there. Now, this is an academic program, so we will also be looking at your transcripts. There are a few things that we look at in particular. So yes, the overall grades. Sure, we're looking at overall strength there. That's wonderful. There are 2 courses in particular that we're looking at. We want to see at least 1 in calculus and at least 1 in statistics. And if you don't have those yet, we can provide courses that you can find. We can even throw it in the chat or the Q&A here if you need to find out where that is. I'm just going to talk about the most common questions or confusion that we get regarding transcripts. So maybe not the most exciting topic, but these are the questions that we get all the time. The first is the differentiation between the transcript copy that you upload in the application. That's something that you have and you are providing directly to us. After you're admitted, we'll ask for the official transcript, and that's something that your school sends directly to us. Pretty simple from most US schools. If your degrees are from abroad, you might just want to check in a little bit earlier with your school to find out what their process is. It can take a little bit longer from an international school. If your transcripts are not in English, just get them certified and submit the certified translated and submit the certified translation along with the original language in your application. And, to close out on here, there's one thing that I do want to make sure that I touch upon. Most of you have not been in school for at least 10 years. A lot of people in this room, 20 plus, right? And so if you were not an A student 20 years ago, I don't want that to prevent you from applying to MIT now. I understand why that might give you questions or pause, but I sure would hope that 10, 20 years later, you've matured. And so if you've had success, if this program is the right place for you, if you believe you can be academically successful here now, don't let that hold you back. We're looking at your whole application. And so if there is a MAR on an earlier transcript from much earlier in life, just know that that is part of a comprehensive review and not an entire reflection. I do see a question already about calculus. If you've not taken it in college, That's okay. I would recommend for either calculus or statistics. I would recommend, if you really have not taken it, it can be so helpful to take a course now. There are a lot of schools, whether they're online or in-person community colleges near you, where you can get a credit-bearing course. And it's great preparation for getting you back into the swing of things in school, preparing you for being back in school again. And so that would be my top recommendation, even above taking a GMAT or GRE. So, if you have done the GMAT or the GRE, we'll certainly look at them. They're not required. Most people don't have them. But I think if you're trying to prepare yourself, taking the course is the best bet. And it actually shows a lot to the committee too. If you passed out of calculus before college, if it shows up as an AP credit on your college transcripts, that can work too. Or if you took then a higher level course that had calculus as a prerequisite, then you can just use the additional information section to kind of tell us and show us that. And so I know I'm seeing your questions popping in. So hopefully for the two of you who put those two questions in, this was really helpful. If you have more, we can talk about it again in the Q&A, but hopefully that helped clear that up for those of you who are looking at this now. AP Calculus, if it's on your college, I'm just looking at the Q&A now. AP Calculus, if it's on your college transcript and you have credit for it, then we can count it. We're essentially looking for those credit-bearing classes that you received college credit for. Okay, let's move on to the next component of the application. Letters of recommendation. So we require 2 letters. One is an organizational support letter and one is a general reference letter. So the general reference letter is very standard. It is, what you might expect in a letter of recommendation, asking for, this may be from any mentor or former boss or executive, someone typically in a more senior position, someone who's worked closely with you and knows you very well. And we're asking primarily for them to recommend you, certainly, but we're asking them to talk about, to provide examples of your past work, examples of how you have impacted an organization, right, and how you have worked. The organizational support letter is a little bit more focused on the future, right? So that will come from someone in your current organization who can provide the support for your participation over the next 20 months. So you'll want to think about someone typically that is, might be your direct boss or your skip level boss, right? Head of your department or division, right? And, it's someone who can answer questions like, how is the organization going to provide support for the time commitment of the program? Or how will they support your expanded skills as you develop through the program, right? Growth opportunities, etc. And we have many application deadlines. So you might be going for our early round deadline in December, or you might be applying for the late round in May. Because we have such a wide range that you might be targeting, we can't tell your recommender what the deadline is. And so you really need to be in touch with them. Let them know which round you are targeting. We will review your application once both letters have been received. Okay, next component of the application. The additional information. This is not required. There are multiple places in the application where we'll accept additional information. So for example, I mentioned the academic, in the academic section, I mentioned you can provide additional information if there's a course that you want to give us context on. There is a whole page where you can, you might provide context on your work history, if you've had a gap in your resume, if there's something about your trajectory that you want to clarify for the committee. And then the general additional information section where you might talk about anything that is important in us really getting to know you that we don't directly ask about. It might be a hobby. It might be a pub that is really important to you. It might be something, it might be a talent that you have outside of the professional sphere. It might be a recognition or award that you want to provide context on. Sometimes your resume might have an award or recognition that perhaps people in your industry know what that means. But maybe people outside of your industry could use a little bit of context. You can use the additional information section to provide that context. It's not required. Not everybody uses the additional information section. This really is just, take a step back before you submit and think about anything that might use a little bit of clarification. All right, so that's the additional information section. Once you have submitted your application, then we move to the interviews. So I saw a question early on about whether the interviews are in person or virtual, and they are in person. They're on campus. Anupa talked a little bit about the program structure. The classes are in person. They're on campus, and you're going to be doing a lot of travel to Cambridge. And so we want the interview process to be able to give you that opportunity to kind of practice that travel, to make sure that you're getting to know us. It's not an interview just in one direction. So we want you to be able to get to know us as much as we're getting to know you. So let me describe the interview process a little bit. You will receive you'll receive a calendar and choose a time from, usually you'll see about 2 weeks of availability. So you might see 5 to 10 possible dates. You choose the time and sign up for it. On the day that you arrive, you'll receive a 2-hour time slot for your interview. And so we ask you to arrive about 15 minutes early. You'll come to our office. You'll see a member of our team first. It might be Anupa, it might be someone else on our wider team, to make sure that you're in the right place. You get settled in before your interview. You might see 1, 2, or 3 other candidates at the same time. We have a little area that's comfortable seating for you. So hopefully you should have a nice warm welcome. Your interviews will start exactly at the time that you see on the reservation. So if you have a 9 a.m. interview, it'll start right at 9 a.m. The interview process itself takes about 2 hours. You'll meet with 2 interviewers. The first one for about 40 minutes, then you'll have about 20 minutes in between, and then your second interviewer for about another 40 minutes. So the whole thing, approximately 2 hours. On that day, we also invite you to stay for lunch. Your lunch might be before or after your interview, depending on what time you choose for your interview. But we invite you to lunch. We have alumni and students who will take you out to lunch. You get to see a little bit more of our building and our cafe space, but also get some time to, outside of the formal interview process, to get to know us and get to know our community a little bit better. Hopefully ask those questions to the students that, that you're really comfortable asking there in that more informal setting. So that is the interview day. If you have even more time, there are great places you can visit our art museums or our MIT museum. After the interview, the final decisions are made by the admissions committee, and then we share them as soon as we can. The dates that you will receive a decision are published, and you can tell it's based on the date that you submit your application, based on the round. So you should have really clear timelines there now, which you can see if you log into the application. You can see all of those timelines now. And we've got them up here. You can screenshot this or just log into the application. All this information is on the main page of the application. So the first deadline, or the first round, this is our early round in December. I don't have any really strong preference for whether you shoot for the early round or the second round. You might need a decision by one date or the other, particularly if you are applying to multiple schools or juggling other decisions or scheduling factors. And so you might want to base the round that you apply for on that. But from my perspective, any of those rounds before the final round are absolutely fine. Space is a little bit more limited if you're applying, at the final deadline or after, right? But whenever you're ready, go for it is my advice. I get that question a lot. All right. Tips. So Anupa, we've given a little bit of background. I see good questions are starting to come in, so I want to make sure we get to them. But you've talked to a lot of people who are planning their applications and seen a lot of applications go through the cycle. Let's the two of us jump in and give some advice.
So the first one is be yourself. Tell your own story. We'll be reading your application like a book. You've grown through both your successes and your failures, and we want to know both. Be authentic, be vulnerable, and talk about what really motivates you as a person. We want to know that.
Right? Uh, Also, think holistically about your candidacy. So we are looking at your professional trajectory, your professional successes and accomplishments, also the challenges that you faced, right? So the accomplishment itself is important, but also what did you have to overcome to get there? That's important. So we're looking at the professional, we're looking at the academic. Again, what have you accomplished, but how have you grown and what have you learned? And then also your community involvement. And that community might be your workplace, it might be another community that you are part of, whether that is your neighborhood or an association or a club. It might be a hobby or a group. Perhaps your community is it might be a sports community. It might maybe anything. It might be your industry or industry associations. So think about all of those different spheres: the professional, the academic, the social and community, and make sure that when you're submitting your application that you've kind of touched upon all three, and so that we can see you as a person.
The next is connect the dots. This is about paying attention to details, about consistency and accuracy of what you're telling us. Any story you share in your essays should align with the rest of your application. If you have held multiple departments in your company, are they all visible in your org chart? If you have dotted line leadership, are the people on that team reflected on the chart as well? Even though the essays have to be contained in 100 words, the additional materials in your application can help bring your experience to life.
Great. And I ask you to reflect upon the mission of MIT Sloan when you're thinking about your application. Anupa shared it earlier. It's to develop principled and innovative leaders who improve the world and to generate ideas that advance management practice. And it is really central to what we are doing here, right? It's the purpose behind everything here. And so to really think about what that means to you, how have you so far in your life put that mission into practice, and how will we help you to do that further? So to improve the world, what are the problems and challenges in your organization or community, right, or industry that you're hoping to solve? How have you taken steps thus far to begin doing that, and what part can we play in that? We're really interested in what challenges can we help you solve. Okay, so with that, those are tips from us, a little bit of background in the application. We're going to dive into your questions now. Thank you for submitting great questions. If somebody else has asked a question that you also want to know the answer to, there's a little thumbs up that you can click. So if you upvote, we'll try and make sure, hopefully we can answer all of the questions we have today, but we're going to get through as many as we can. So I will just start with one of the early questions that I saw. Somebody who submitted as we were talking earlier was a question about recommendation letters. If you have applied previously, can you use recommendation letters from a previous application? And I actually think that brings up another good point, is that we do accept reapplications. It's okay to apply even if you have in the past. And you can reuse one letter of recommendation. The organizational support letter is always going to need to be new, though. So if you have in the system, if you have a letter of recommendation from a previous application, if it shows up for you in the system, you can use it, but the organizational support letter always needs to be new. All right, Anupa, let me know if you see something in here that you want me to get to, a question on here that you want me to get to first.
Sure, sure.
Okay,
I'm just still
perfect.
looking and I'm just, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Good. Okay, why don't we stick on the topic of the recommendation letters, because I see a few here that are on this topic, and then we'll move to another. So I see, can the general reference letter be from your stakeholders, right? Those are people who know you well, and can that letter also focus on weaknesses? Yes, so yes, the general reference letter absolutely can be from your stakeholder and should be from someone who's a stakeholder in some form or another. Actually, in all of the letters, we do ask any recommender, whether it's the general recommender or the organizational support letter, for some sense of an area in which they think that you can develop, and that through the program. And so that is a chance to show, right, that is a chance for them to talk about areas that you're working on. And then another one, right, if your CEO or COO is writing a letter of recommendation, can it also serve as the letter of support? In the application, we require 2, but you may have 3 letters. But you will actually be selecting which letter is the organizational support letter and which is the general reference letter. And the difference really between the two is just the set of questions that we're going to be asking them. So the organizational support letter needs to come from someone who's in a position, right, who's in a position to give that type of support. And then they will receive questions from us, or the prompt for their letter will be more along the lines of, discussion, of understanding that the organization has around the schedule that you'll have, and opportunities for you to develop and grow while you're in the program. They also can add what they would like to that letter. They can provide more context. It is a letter of recommendation too. It just focuses a little bit more on the future. And then, for that question, if it's the CEO's writing that, the COO can write the just general recommendation. You can kind of choose who you want to provide each, as long as the person giving organizational support is in the position to do so. All right. Good. So I think we've gotten good on the letters of recommendation.
Sarah,
Go ahead.
there's one more.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
How does the organizational support letter fare with entrepreneurs if I am the business owner, if this is my second or third company started,
Oh,
etc.?
I'm glad you asked that, because I'm sure you're not the only entrepreneur who will be watching this. We certainly have a lot applying who are in a similar position. So if you are an entrepreneur, if you have a board of directors, that the letter should come from someone on your board of directors. If you don't have a board of directors, then but do have a major investor, it should come from that investor, right? So if it's and then if you don't have either one of those, then you let us know who would be in a position to provide that support from your organization. So let us know who that is and why they're the person who's right to provide that support. But if you do have a board or a major investor, right, or it should be them. Co-founders also would count kind of in the, like, first board, then major investor, and or co-founders. Right, they any of them would be good for that. Okay. Can your general recommendation include organizational support? Absolutely, right? You might have the official organizational support letter, and then the general recommendation might also be from someone in your organization. And so they can certainly add to or add additional support in that letter for sure. But one just needs to be officially providing the support from the organization. That's all. All right, what else do we see here, Anupa?
Okay. Okay. There's one. Many applicants have extensive leadership experience already. From the committee's perspective, what differentiates a strong EMBA candidate's essays, especially in showing how they learn from action, not just lead?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, there's only so much that you can describe in an essay. And so don't worry so much about telling us everything there is to know about you. If you give, if in each essay, right, if in an essay you provide a strong example, right? So we ask, one of the essays is about a time, right, is about a time that you learned about yourself, that you learned about your leadership strengths and weaknesses during a difficult time for your team. And so if you have a lot of leadership experience, there are probably many examples that you could draw from. And so it will be tempting to generalize on what you often do or have done many times. But what can really make a stronger letter is to force yourself to think about a very specific time, right? One particular time, and what you did, what the scenario was, what the team was going through, and what you did and what you learned about yourself in that specific example. We will, if when you're invited for interview, we will ask follow-up questions. We'll talk about different circumstances. You'll have plenty of time, right? We know that there's more there. But I think the way that you can have a strongest essay is to focus on one strong example, versus getting too buried in the generalities, especially when you have a lot of examples to draw from. That was a good one, Anupa. All right, what else do we have here? I'm just gonna scan through.
Sure.
I see a question about the resume, about whether you can remove the awards, publications, hobby section of the resume and use it, and use the additional information sections to provide that information instead. You certainly can. If that helps in your formatting and that works better, you certainly can. I think often what I see will be on the resume itself. You might have awards or if it's publications, particularly if you're in the scientific realm, right? If you have pages of publications, it's best to remove that from the resume, right? So that you can just have a 2-page resume. And so in that example, you might move it to the other page. The 2-page resume is just really going to be the highlights. And so you might have some award, you might have an award that's particularly meaningful on there, or a publication that's particularly impactful on there. But the additional information section is really the place to provide context. I would advise or recommend, when you have a lot of pages, so in the additional information section, you can upload a document. And I've seen people upload a 32-page document of, either publications or papers that they've written, but, I've seen people upload rather large documents there. The format that our committee is reading the application in makes that pretty cumbersome. And so my advice to you is to try and keep anything there under 5 pages, right? Something that is that's easy to navigate for the committee. So more of the executive summary. Okay. A question about the interview. Are each of the interviews focused on different elements? Yes, they are going to be a little bit focused on different elements. So the interview it's going to be, in a lot of ways, it'll be similar to any business interview that you've had. So it's about you. You're the expert in some ways. That's really good news. You can kind of sit back and relax. Nobody knows about you and your life experience more than you do. A lot of our questions are going to be experience-based, for you to give examples of situations that you've been in, right? So you might receive some behavioral-based interview questions. Tell us about a time when. In those, try to remember what you wrote about in your essays so that you can talk about different examples and make it additive. The interviewers will have read your application, and their questions are going to be based around really they will approach that interview from a perspective of wanting to advocate for you to the admissions committee. And so all of their questions are going to be focused around strengthening the assumptions that they have from reading your application, filling in any gaps, anticipating questions that they might receive from the admissions committee. And so they're really here to help. They have what's in writing, as does the rest of the committee, and they're really there to help you fill in the gaps so that to the committee where the final decisions are made, we have a really robust story from you with examples and amazing data to help support your admission. So that's how the interviewers are approaching the experience. Okay, let's see. Anupa, I see you, it looks like you've flagged one or two others for us to get to. I see one about why reasons that someone doesn't get through the application process. So, okay, here's the question. What are the reasons if anyone doesn't get through the application process, without going into too much details, but an example of where an application process can fail? Okay, let's talk about this. I will give some specific examples. So on the first, it can it can be simply that one of the basic criteria is not met, right? You don't have 10 years of experience, or right, or you haven't demonstrated in your written application leadership experience. Right, so it could be anything from the essays, right? There are lots of errors in the application. So it might be, or that you don't have a letter of support from your organization. So some of these are really black and white, just something clear in the instructions isn't met or isn't put together clearly. And that absolutely happens. So that's some of it, is just making sure that that your application is tight, that you meet the criteria, and that you're answering the questions, and that you're not leaving anything blank. If you follow the instructions, that gets you a good way. Once you get to the interview, it means that there's some strength in your application already, right? The committee saw something in your written application that we wanted to see more of. And so that is a really great sign and a great indication of, really great indication that you've shown something that the committee sees potential in you. And from there, sometimes it might be something absolutely within your control, right? It could be in the interview that you just were, that you just didn't have answers, or right, or you're rude to somebody, you're not providing an answer. Some of those real just normal, if you've kind of been in an interview, you see something like that. And sometimes it really just is, it is a competitive process. You might have an amazing background, and occasionally it just is that we have a very specific number of seats in the class, and it just might be that in this year we just had to make a hard decision, and right, and somebody else was a little bit more qualified, or met the or had an experience that we needed in the class at that time. So sometimes there is really nothing wrong with you, and we have limited seats, and it can be competitive. So it really runs the gamut from things that are very much within your control to things that are very much not. Anupa, do you think I missed anything major with that?
Oh, I think that was you have it all covered. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
There is one question about GMAT and GRE that you might want to talk about, because that's a question that we get quite often.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. It's great. Yeah, if your academic history is, if your academic history is middling, or if you have something on your transcript that you don't think is really demonstrating your potential, what can you do? The GMAT or the GRE they can help. So if you are taking them, if you're applying to other programs or have applied to other programs and you have those scores, and they're strong, submit them to us. Definitely don't hold back, or you could do the executive assessment as well. Certainly we'll look at those scores. I think often we are looking at, for yes, that academic history, but also if you've had strong professional success since that time, that demonstrates, right, consistency, hard work, intellectual rigor, right? I mean, sometimes we can see that in your career trajectory too. And so there, we will also take into account what you were doing then versus what you're doing now. If there's a specific course that we want you to take, or something specific that we think that would be helpful to prepare, we'll also give that to you. I think the most common things that we'll ask people to do are are just to take a calculus or a statistics class in order to either brush up or prepare. But yes, GMAT, GRE, they can be helpful, but for most people, it's not going to be necessary, even if you were a B or C student. Okay, what else do we have? All right, let's see.
There is a question about providing 3 recommendation letters.
Yeah.
When is that advised?
Yeah, good question. Most people only need 2 letters of recommendation. We allow 3, and I think the third is useful if it provides a different context from the other 2. So, for example, if let's say you are new in your company, and so you have the organizational support, but not a lot of depth there, then you might have the organizational support letter, 1 reference letter, and then if you had either a job that was in a very different, a prior job that was in a very different context, or for example, you have, are you on the board for an organization or have devoted a lot of time and effort to something outside of the professional sphere, but that also demonstrated community commitment and leadership? Would someone in that right? Would a leader from that organization be a useful context for the committee? That might be, right? That might be a good use case for a third letter, a scenario like that. For most people, it's not necessary. So you really, you can kind of make a judgment call on that. There's not a judgment on, right? There's not really a judgment from us on that. You can make the call on whether you want the third. Most people don't. So I don't want you to think that you need it. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I see a question about community involvement. So based on individual cultural context, family can be a big part of that community. And to what extent does your commitment and role as a parent factor into a holistic view of you? I think that's a big part of who you are. You'll notice that you'll notice the application is not specifically asking any questions about your family status. But that might be a big part of how you make decisions, of how you decide what's important, right? That might be an area where you're devoting a lot of time. It might also be something that motivates you in your career, that points you in one direction or the other. And is a part of your story. And if it's a part of your story and important to you, then find a way to weave it in. Okay. Okay. I see a question about what style of writing do we prefer in the essays? Narrative, storytelling, or more analytical? I don't see those as opposing styles necessarily. So yes, narrative and storytelling, while providing specific examples and data. And some of the questions will lend themselves more to one than the other. So, for example, For example, the question about your community involvement might lend itself to more of a narrative storytelling style. The question about a time that you have brought an idea to your organization, right? Either identified an opportunity or brought an idea to your organization that changed the way they approached a challenge or an opportunity. Know that I'm going to expect some analysis in that answer. What, I'm going to want to understand in that essay where you came up with the idea or initiative. So kind of where did the initiative come from? Was it a were you asked to solve a challenge, or how did you encounter the problem that needed to be solved, or how did you encounter the opportunity? To what were the, having identified the challenge, what were the alternatives that you considered or that could have been pursued, right? What alternatives did you consider? How did you decide which path to go in? Was there pushback? How did you convince others, right? And then how did you decide whether this was a success or not? Did you measure it? What were those measurements? There might be numbers involved here, but right there I'm going to want to see some analysis. I hope that helped a little bit, right? But that's going to depend on the essay question. Great. Okay, I see a question about the GMAT score format. I can actually, why don't we send you an email and we can make sure that the score format fits in there. It should be able to fit into the application, but but we'll make sure if you're having trouble entering anything, Anupa, why don't we can actually post our email address in here, write to us at emba.admissions. If if you're having trouble getting the scores in there, we can help you out with that. Great. Let's see, another question. Let's go to somebody maybe who we haven't. Here's one that it looks like it has a couple of that's been upvoted a couple of times. So a question about the how you deal with confidential projects. So what are the confidentiality controls in the application? Have we ever agreed to an NDA with a candidate? So in the application process, anything you put in the application is really considered, right? Within our team, it is only read by, right? It's only seen by our admissions committee in the context of this work. It's highly protected. However, if you have national security clearance or something, right? So for the most part, anything that you're putting, really anything you're putting in here is not going beyond, right? It's not going beyond the admissions committee. However, if you have security clearance, there are certain things that it doesn't matter how secure we keep it, you're just not allowed to share. And so if you have a story that you want to tell, but has some part of it that you can't say, it's okay to give a little bit of context around what you aren't saying. So you can, if you need to be a little bit general, but explain why and sort of what you're not saying. And that's something, we've worked with over the years. We've had many applicants from industries with, high security. And so, you kind of find a way to tell the story in a version that you're allowed to and kind of explain. I can't tell you what the industry was, or I can't tell you the name of the company in this context, right? But here's what I can tell you about the situation. And we're used to working with that, especially if you tell us that some part of it is being redacted, it will make a little bit more sense. Okay, let's see. Okay, what else do we have? I see a question. I'm not sure if I completely understand it. It's asking about the recommendations. about what I think. So Ahmed, you can let me know if I'm interpreting this wrong, but I think it's asking about would we come back after we've reviewed your application? Would we come back with recommendations on how to strengthen or close the gaps in the application? I think that's what you're asking. I would recommend instead, before you submit your application, I recommend that anybody before applying, reaches out to have a call with an admissions advisor. So, you know, you can, if you have filled out the interest form on our website, you may have already received an invitation to talk with an admissions advisor. If you didn't, you can write to us at emba.admissions, or you can find the link to schedule a call right in the application itself. But I really do recommend that you talk to an admissions advisor, before you submit your application. Once you submit your application, we're going to evaluate that on the basis of what you've submitted, and we won't be able to provide feedback about your application. So if you don't move forward, if your application doesn't move forward, we won't be able to provide specific feedback about what the particular gaps were in that application. Okay, another one. Looks like we have a question about the approximate acceptance rate. We don't publish the acceptance rate. I mentioned the admissions advisors previously. Our hope is that we try to make that process really accessible, that you can talk to us. There are webinars like this, but we also think it's really valuable for each one of you to have a consultation with an admissions advisor to talk about where you are in your career and kind of where your accomplishments have been, what are the gaps that you're trying to fill, what are you trying to accomplish next. And the admissions advisors can help steer you towards timing on your application, or what you might want to emphasize more in your what you might want to emphasize more or talk about more in your application. Would it be useful to wait one more year? Should you get that next promotion before you apply? Things like that. And so if we're doing our job well, we're providing some pretty good guidance so that you have a strong sense of timing when you're submitting your application. And so the rate of acceptance varies from year to year, but our goal is that you have a strong chance, and it can be upwards of 40% if we're doing a good job in steering you right. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, I see a question about whether this will be recorded. Yes, it will. So I don't know exactly what date, but it should be fairly soon up with the rest of the recordings on our website. So you should be able to see this later. Okay, and what else do we have? Okay, so questions about, and we are actually getting towards 9 o'clock. I do see, I think now as I'm scanning through the questions, I think there are a few more than we will be able to get to today. So hopefully the invitation for a call, hopefully we've answered a lot of questions that you came in with. Our invitation for a call stands. If you have not talked to someone on our team, write to emba.admissions, or schedule a call with an advisor if you've not had one yet. And we have okay, so I think we won't be able to get to all of the questions that are left in here. So why don't we talk about what's next? We have a few more opportunities that you can engage with us before our first round. So Anupa will close out the Q&A for now. And why don't we tell them what they can learn? Why don't we give them a little peek towards how they can learn more about us this fall?
So these are the upcoming MIT EMBA events. If you live close to any of these areas, try and attend one of these. This is a great way to meet members of our admissions team, current students, and alumni. In Tampa, you'll be able to meet with our Director of Executive Degree Programs, Amber Ackerman. Chrissy Dolore, who you probably would have seen in the other videos and other webinars, will be in Baltimore and Jersey City. If you live around Bellevue, Washington, you'll get to meet Sarah. So please try and register for any of these events. If you live close by, these are really, really helpful. With this, we come to the end of our webinar. Thank you for taking out the time for attending the webinar. I hope this has been informational and useful. We hope to see your application in for this round of our recruitment cycle. And if you have any questions, please email us at emba.admissions@mit.edu. Like Sarah said, we could not answer a few questions. So if you want to just email them to us, our team will definitely get back to you. Thank you and have a great night.